Alrighty. What is going on, Pats Nation? You guys already know who it is. Patriots Global here, back with another video. And in this one, I did the title, you can probably tell. We're going to be just doing an off-season broad spectrum preview. We're going to be talking about free agency. We're going to be talking about the draft. You guys ask the questions. Your boy is going to answer. Let me know how things are on your guys' end. Is the audio coming through well? Is everything else coming through well? Make sure you guys let me know. You guys are my eyes and my ears on this one. So make sure to let your boy know. We sounding good. What is going on? Looks like the first person in here was that one Patriots fan. But I think this is the first live stream. This is really the first actual time I've been able to talk to you guys since unfortunately we were hacked. So it's good to be back. It's great to be back, honestly. I mean, let me tell you, the heart attack that I had when my account got hacked, it's like when you're about to die and they say that it just flashes before your eyes. I mean, just this last few years of me, making this channel since I started the channel in 2017, everything just flashed right before my eyes. Um, Let me tell you, it. I was ready. I was ready to accept the deep depression phase that I was about to fall in if this channel was fully gonna be hacked without the ability of getting it back. But we got it back. We got it back. That's all that matters. I feel like this light's a little bit bright. Turn it down a little bit. Oh, that's not turning it down. There we go. Do I look too dark now? Nah, I feel like that looks good. Like looks better than it was before, at least. Make go scare the crap out of me, man. Thought you were gone forever. Me too. Me too. So, like I said, at some point, I want to make a whole video, like in depth on what happened, just for those who really want to know. But kind of a long story short version here is let me tell you, I was for a good week in talks with YouTube. I mean, the moment I found out I got hacked, it was a race against time to figure out what was going on. How do I get this account back? Because they changed my recovery email, my recovery password. They changed everything to the point where I wasn't going to be able to get my account back. So I was doing all this research on how to get it back, and the way it was hacked was actually a way that several YouTubers are getting hacked now. It's a really big problem, but at least now I learned my lesson. Um, but was in talks with YouTube in DMs and emails back and forth every single day, going through long, long, long investigations on how to get the channel back, having to prove that I am the sole creator of this channel and that I did genuinely get compromised and hijacked, as they would say. Um, so I basically was going through that with YouTube for a week, was finally able to get it back, but my god, they changed so much on the channel. They changed the profile picture, the banner. I had to make a whole new banner because I didn't have my old banner, which I actually like the new banner anyway. Um, there's just a lot of technical stuff that they changed that I'm even still trying to get everything fixed. But I'm just so thankful that I have the channel back. And hopefully the monetization side of the channel is able to get fixed. But Reggie P with the first donation of today's chat, and the first donation since we've been back. Reggie P, brother, a big, big, big appreciation to you here, helping me out here, especially since I was away from YouTube for a while. YouTube's really kind of banging at me right now, so your donation really, really helps out. You said you think we can get Olave or Davis at 21. Um, I definitely think it's a possibility. I think the level of possibility that New England gets one of those guys is going to be very dependent on what happens with quarterbacks. Now, this is an absolutely terrible quarterback class, in my opinion, but high demand, high supply. Um, you know all about that. Quarterback's the most important position in football, one of the most important positions in sports, period. And there are several teams that still need a starting quarterback. I mean, the Steelers. You look at the Colts potentially moving on from Carson Wentz. They need a quarterback. There's a lot of teams that need quarterbacks. The Denver Broncos need a quarterback. So with that being said, supply and demand, if teams are going to push to get these quarterbacks because, hey, we need a quarterback, we're going to draft one in this year's draft, then I could see these guys falling. But if teams are looking at just going from a pure talent standpoint and kind of just skipping on quarterbacks this year because it's a terrible quarterback class, then I can see those guys getting taken. I mean, if Olave's there at 21, man, if Olave's there, you gotta go Chris Olave. I mean, Chris Olave is the absolute best fit for the Patriots. Now, I don't hate Davis at 21. I think he can be an explosive piece. I just don't I just don't love him at 21. For me personally, the whole idea of taking a wide receiver in the first round is pretty much ruined for me because one, Belichick's never done it. Belichick's never done it. He's been coaching, as the head coach for the Patriots over 20 years, and he did this once, one time. You know who that guy was? N'Keal Harry, and look how that panned out. Now, yes, N'Keal Harry was a dumb pick because he doesn't fit the system whatsoever, and I could have told you that from the start of the pick, but because of that, kind of gives me PTSD. I'm not a big fan of going wide receiver in the first, especially because this is a really good wide receiver class. You can get quality wide receivers in the second, third, and whatnot. Um, so me personally, there's just several different aspects that are going to go into taking a wide receiver in the first round. You got to think Drake London is the first to second wide receiver off the board. So there's a decent chance that Olave should be there at 21. But again, with the draft, I mean, you never really know. We've seen crazy things happen. Just because a guy is number one on draft boards doesn't mean he's going to get taken first. It all comes down to scheme fit and how a team views that specific player in their scheme. So, I mean, Chris Olave could be the first receiver taken off the board if a team before the 21st pick decides to go, hey, he's going to fit our system. He's going to be a game changer versus a guy like Drake London. We're going to take him, and he's going to be our receiver for the first round pick. But I do still think one of those guys that you did list has to be there at the 21st overall pick. When you're mixing in quarterbacks that are probably going to go, you mix in corners, edge rushers, and then several different other positions. One of those guys, you just has to be there. You look at what we've seen over the last few years in the draft, even the top wide receivers are dropping. Um, just a little bit due to the sole factors of the point of there being that there are more important positions of need for these teams than wide receiver, which a lot of times you can go out on the free agency market or trade and get a quality guy or get a quality guy in the later rounds versus other positions like offensive line or quarterback, which is what teams are taking earlier on in these drafts. Reggie P, bro, thank you again for the donation. Looks like we got another one here, another donation in the chat from my boy Antoine Perkins. He says, if we get Jameson Williams in the first round, we will have him locked up for 4 years with a fifth-year option. Even if he doesn't play this year, we still love him, or we still have him rather. I don't know why I got love. We still have him for 4 years under a rookie deal. Yeah, and that rookie deal is going to be tremendous for the Patriots. I mean, it sucks that they have the 21st overall pick when they could have still had a pick in the teens. It would have been later teens, but still could have had a higher pick. Unfortunately, the route for the Patriots to get a higher pick just didn't go the way whatsoever. The 21st pick is the lowest pick the Patriots could have gotten. So things didn't exactly work out in our favor. Like I said, Williams is a guy that I'm not huge on taking in the first round. Like me personally, I think there's a lot of other guys at that point, depending on who's on the board, that I would take over a guy like Williams. It just for me, when I think of Chris Olave specifically, he's just a specific mold for the New England Patriots. Elite route runner, sure-handed, has really good short area quickness. He is this New England Patriots offensive scheme. Exactly this Patriots offensive scheme. So you're getting a guy who has been proven several times to succeed within your system, and you're getting at an elite level on a 4-year rookie contract with a 5th-year option. Like I said, though, there's not a whole lot of receivers I would personally take in the first. If Chris Olave is, I'm definitely taking Chris Olave in the first. But there are some guys in like the second and third round when it comes to wide receiver that I also really like, which is why, again, when I think of guys like, in this case, looking at Williams, like I'd be okay with passing on because again, there's guys in the second to third round that I also really like that this team could get. For example, John Mechie, a guy who I really like that the Patriots could potentially get, who isn't going to be a first round pick. In the first round, I think you're looking at more important positions that you aren't going to get later on. You're looking at cornerback. You're looking at, strong safety or free safety. You're looking at offensive line. You know what I'm saying? Like more important positions that you can't necessarily get later down the road. Um, and I'm gonna be completely honest with you guys, and this is something that I think is about to upset a lot of people in the chat. It wouldn't surprise me to see the Patriots trade down or trade out. With having the 21st overall pick, I wouldn't mind seeing them trade down because at 21, you can still trade down, be in the first round, and still pick up a fourth, third, second round pick just by trading down a few spots. Um, but when you look at the amount of picks the Patriots have, I think they have six total picks in this year's draft, if I remember correctly. Very low. Now what we're used to seeing, this team also is very tight up against the cap this year. The draft is going to be really important for them to hit on because they don't have, 70, 80, 90, $100 million to spend in free agency like we did a year ago. It's going to be very slim pickings for us, unfortunately, this offseason. So, again, with that being said, you're going to have to really show off in the draft. And this team's not going to be able to trade up a lot in the draft like we've seen in the last couple of years because, unfortunately, we just don't have the draft capital. With that being said, the Patriots trade down in the first round or completely trade out in the first round. They're compiling second, third, fourth round picks that they can, use to help build their draft capital and start moving up later in the draft or just at the end of the draft have more picks at the end of the day. Something that would not surprise me at all to see the Patriots do. But Perkins, really, really appreciate you, man, for that $10 donation. Anthony, man, I always see you in my comments, so definitely want to get to your question. You said, "Hey, Patriots Global, is it more important to go cornerback or wide receiver in the first round?" I would say corner if we don't keep J.C. Jackson, and we should go for Andrew Booth Jr. first round and then go Mechie in the second round. Thoughts? Um, I don't hate it. I don't hate it. My question mark for me is which corners are going to be there by the 21st overall pick. This is a pretty decent class when it comes to corners, and I still have to do more due diligence to get my full understanding on this cornerback class. But from what I'm understanding from what I've heard from my buddy Broshmo, who's a draft expert, is that this draft class is pretty good at the cornerback position, but the real good cornerbacks are likely to be taken before the 21st overall pick. Again, it's the draft. Crazy things happen. These guys can fall. And there's certain cornerbacks that are first round projections that I don't like for the Patriots that I wouldn't go with. But in this case, if you're asking me what is more important for the Patriots to go cornerback or wide receiver in the first, 120%, I'm going with cornerback. Now, at the end of the day, with the draft, when you draft, if you're drafting the right way, you draft for the talent that's there, and you're not going to just draft for a need. You could have Chris Olave there at 21, or you could have a cornerback that is a second to third round pick. Yeah, cornerback is going to be a much bigger need, but at the end of the day, who's going to make a bigger impact? Who's the more talented overall player that is going to make that impact in the longevity of your team? It would be Chris Olave in this case. A couple of years ago, we saw the Patriots really, really reach for Jordan Richards because they needed help at that specific position. They liked Jordan Richards. They reached really bad. And we know the journey that Jordan Richards ultimately took instead of the Patriots taking the most talented player. Even if you're stacked at that position where um, So let's say you're stacked at the position where you take a player that was the most talented at that current spot. It's better to do that than to reach for a player just because you need help at a certain position. So with that being said, I like cornerback, but it does need to depend on who is going to be there at the 21st overall pick. But in a nutshell, if you're asking me between cornerback and wide receiver, if there's good receivers and corners there at 21, what am I going? I'm going cornerback because that is what the Patriots need. Whether they get JC Jackson extended or not, they need cornerback help. If JC Jackson doesn't come back, you're just absolutely screwed because not only do you need a cornerback one, but you would need a cornerback two also. And I know we have Jalen Mills who did pretty well at cornerback two this season, much better than at least I can speak for myself, much better than I was expecting. But in the best case scenario, Jalen Mills is playing as a cornerback three. I think he plays excellently as a CB3 slash rover for this team because he was a little inconsistent when playing as CB2. Perfect case scenario, you get JC Jackson back. JC Jackson is now your number one starting cornerback. You move Jalen Mills to your third cornerback, kind of that Jason McCourty type role, make him a rover for your team, whether he's playing safety or cornerback, but put him in that third positioned role. And then with your second cornerback, you're either going with someone you picked up in free agency or you're going with a first round selection that you picked up at cornerback. And I think that pans out perfectly well then for the Patriots and the secondary that they've really relied on over the last several years. The reason that I wouldn't go wide receiver specifically in the first round in that case is that I think cornerback is a more pressing need for the Patriots. I do think that they can still get past with the weapons they have. You got to think they get more production out of Jonnu Smith in 2022. You still have Jonnu Smith. You still have Hunter Henry. You still have an elite backfield. You still have guys like you have to believe Jacoby Myers comes back as a restricted free agent. The Patriots tend to him and get him back for at least one more year. You have Kendrick Bourne coming back, who was an excellent piece for this team. Is it a great receiving core all around? No, but it can definitely get the job done versus the more pressing need at cornerback. And like you said too, John Mechie, like I said earlier, also myself, like there's receivers in the second to third round that are still really good players that could genuinely make a difference for this team. Um, and we can go on and on. I mean, Sky Moore, John Mechie, guys who aren't going to be first round projections that could still make a genuine difference. Yes, yes, yes. We also have Jonathan Jones too. Jonathan Jones coming back, taking over in the slot. Will be a big addition for the Patriots. Let me see. So here's a good question. I'm gonna make a whole video on this. But with the question coming up now, a good time to answer. Why would we tag and trade JC Jackson? So rumors are going around that the Patriots are expected, coming from Evan Lazar, that the Patriots are expected to tag JC Jackson, which I believe is like 17 17 to 8 no, 16 to 18 million dollars um on a tagged cornerback, which is what JC Jackson would make. So if the Patriots do place that tag on him, he's making 16 to 18 million on that 1 year contract unless they get an extension done with him. But the hope is that they place that franchise tag on him and then during the draft they try to get an extension done with JC Jackson to lower that cap number. Let's keep in mind if the Patriots tag JC Jackson and they cannot get an extension done, they are not making really any more moves the entirety of this offseason because we already have no money and 16 to 18 million dollars for one player is going to put us so tightly against the cap that we'll barely be able to re-sign other players. And I think Belichick knows that. So with that being said, if this team cannot extend JC Jackson to lower that tagged cap number that they have him under when they place that franchise tag on him. That number is going to be too high. They won't be able to make any other roster moves. So they're ultimately going to have to trade him, get some compensation from him. One, because you have to think if the Patriots tag and trade him, they're going to get a first, second round pick versus they let him walk. At best, they're going to get a third round comp pick in 2023. But you trade JC Jackson at that point so that you have cap space freed up. You try to get an extension done, it doesn't work, and at least you get a much better compensation back with actual cap space back also in return. But they're going to try to get him extended. They're trying to get JC Jackson extended, but in the longevity of things at this current time, we don't know. Is that actually going to go through or not? Both sides have a long way to go with JC Jackson being the best cornerback on the open market. Reggie P out here with another $10 donation. Reggie P is absolutely going insane today. You said, what is your ceiling for Mac next year if we can get him some weapons? Do you think he can take a Burrow-like leap? I don't see why not. Why can't he take a Burrow-like leap? When you look at Joe Burrow in his first year compared to his second year, yeah, Joe Burrow had a fantastic first year, despite the injury. I mean, Joe Burrow probably would have had a better first year than Mac Jones overall if he doesn't get injured. And I think really high of Joe Burrow personally. Really, really love him as a player, and that's not saying anything bad about Mac because Mac had an absolutely excellent rookie season. But he really did take that big step the following year because I feel like a lot of times, especially at the quarterback position, but even with players in general, when you see them take that sophomore jump from that rookie year to their sophomore year, their first to second year in the NFL, a lot of times there's a lot of high expectations placed on their second year, but they don't live up to those expectations in year number two. In fact, they really take a step back. They kind of get a little bit more lackluster and they don't meet anything near the expectations that people had for them going into their second year after a spectacular first year. I think one of the big ways that Joe Burrow was able to avoid that, was able to actually have a better year than he had his rookie year, was due to the fact that he had weapons. Now, what you do have to understand, though, too, is that Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow actually had chemistry. That's why so many people were pushing for them to go with Jamar Chase versus Penei Sewell at the time. Yes, the Bengals desperately need offensive line help, but if you have a number one guy, which at the time Joe Burrow did not, you have T. Higgins, great, but that was not Joe Burrow's guy. That's not your true number one guy. You draft Jamar Chase. That's your immediate plug-in, day one, number one guy. But Joe Burrow also had chemistry with him already when they played at LSU together. So it wasn't one of these things where, you're taking a quarterback from one college, and then the next year you're taking a wide receiver from another college, and they're meeting for the first time, and they're having to build chemistry for the first time. I mean, that was really a day one plug-in between Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow that was going to make a day one impact because they already had chemistry together. Now, unfortunately, the Patriots don't really have that option in the first round, but they do have an option like that with John Mechie, a guy who they can take who's expected to be a second to third round projection. We're going to see how he kind of grades out and tests here at the combine to see if that's going to rise his draft status, drop his draft status. And when I say that, John Mechie is nothing close to the talent that Jamar Chase is. I'm not comparing the two at all. But if you're talking about a guy that can be a genuine difference maker for your team that actually has a repertoire already, a rapport with your quarterback that can make that difference day one because they have chemistry already together, that would be, in this case, John Mechie for the Patriots. Although, of course, again, that talent level nowhere close to what Jamar Chase is. But again, if the Patriots are able to get an elite number one wide receiver for Mac Jones, someone who we can go to in times of need, someone who can get open really quick. Because if you look at Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, the Bengals offensive line was still completely demolished in 2021. The reason their offense looked so good and the reason the offensive line looked better than it really was because Joe Burrow got that ball out so quick because his receivers, Jamar Chase, for example, got open so quick that the pass rush of opposing teams couldn't get to Joe Burrow quick enough because he was getting the ball out so quick because his receivers were getting open so quick and he had these chemistry with the guys of being already on the same page. With the Patriots already having a good established offensive line, you now get Mac Jones, that number one guy, that's now going to drop other guys like Jacoby Myers, Kendrick Bourne into legitimate roles that they should be in. No one's going to be playing in a role above what they should be. So, am I saying he's going to be a top 5 quarterback next season if you get him a true number 1 receiver? No, that's not what I'm saying. I think he'll definitely be top 10. He was just peaking top 10 already in his rookie season. Um, but I think it really will start to make the world of difference for him, but it's really gonna make the world of difference for the offense, as a unit. Reggie, really appreciate you, buddy, for that $10 donation. And yes, your boy is back with the chalky milk, as you already know. Ooh, a little too chocolatey. So if we tag JC Jackson, what's the bigger need? Wide receiver or cornerback? It's still cornerback for me, honestly. Um, like I mentioned, supply and demand earlier. I like the wide receivers that are still in the second to third round versus it depends on what corners are there in the first. I will say that there are certain corners that are expected to go earlier and certain corners I don't like in the first. Um, so this really is one of those situations where it does depend who is on the board at that time. But even if you tag JC Jackson, one, they'll likely trade him if they can't get that extension done with him. Um, but two, the Patriots still need cornerback help outside of JC Jackson. You look at what they did in the secondary this past year, it was good at times, but it was pretty inconsistent. And that was with JC Jackson. They still need cornerback help, whether JC Jackson is back on the team or not. It's just a number one absolute pressing need if JC Jackson does leave. I also think the Patriots like to go and they like to get already established wide receivers. You know what I'm saying? Like they like to go out via trade. They like to go out free agency. That's where they like to get these wide receivers who have kind of showcased themselves already in the NFL versus having to really develop a wide receiver, which everything going on right now with the Patriots coaching staff, especially offensively, I don't know how confident I am that they're going to develop a wide receiver right off the bat. So that's kind of another way to look at it too. So we talked about this a little bit earlier, but I wouldn't be surprised at all to see the Patriots trade out or at least down in the first round. Again, not as many picks as we've seen over the last several years where the Patriots have had multiple first round picks or multiple second round picks or multiple third round picks. We have one first, one second, one third, um, and only sitting at about six draft picks from what I've heard, as long as that number is correct, which I'm pretty sure is correct, which is not enough draft picks to be able to be trading up and down in the draft. Could the Patriots trade down, compile more picks? For sure. But the last several years, we've seen them trade up at least once. And they, unfortunately, at this time, with those 6 draft picks, do not have the capital to be trading up in the draft. So, with that being said, it would not surprise me at all. See the Patriots trade down and, depending on how far they trade down, pick up an extra second, third, or fourth round pick, or completely trade out of the first and get even more draft capital. And I know we hate to think about that because, we love to think about a first round talent, in New England and the possibilities with that. But from a Belichick standpoint, it would not surprise me at all. And it shouldn't surprise anybody else. Why haven't we gotten an offensive coordinator yet? So I do believe Belichick wants Bill O'Brien. I mean, Josh McDaniels has been here for how long? 15, 20 years. Um, it's hard to replace that guy. How would you think Belichick would replace a guy that's been here for 15 to 20 years coaching this offense? By replacing him with a guy that has already been in this system, Bill O'Brien. Unfortunately for Belichick, Bill O'Brien works for Belichick's best friend in Nick Saban. And Belichick doesn't want that feud to kind of occur. I mean, look at all of the great things Nick Saban has done for the Patriots. I mean, Mac Jones, um, Patriots drafted they've drafted a lot of different players out of Alabama. Christian Barmore. We can go on and on about the amount of players they've drafted from Alabama, and that really comes back to that Bill Belichick and Nick Saban connection because they really are best friends, and they kind of have this rule about poaching coaching staff from each other. You know how pissed off Bill Belichick was when Josh McDaniels left and took 80% of the Patriots offensive coaching staff with him. Belichick was not happy. He thought that him and Josh McDaniels had more respect for each other than to really just leave each other high and dry like that, like Josh McDaniels did for Bill Belichick and his offensive side of the coaching staff. Belichick doesn't want to burn that bridge with Nick Saban. He's not going to just take his offensive coordinator from him out under his feet like that, unless Nick Saban says, "Hey, Bill, it's okay. I understand. Go ahead. We'll be okay. You go ahead and you take Bill O'Brien." Unless that happens, the Patriots aren't going to get Bill O'Brien, but I guarantee you, Bill Belichick wants Bill O'Brien in this building. Unfortunately, also, Belichick likes to usually promote from the bottom up, but the Patriots have lost so much coaching personnel over the last few years that there's nobody to promote from the bottom up. You could try to say maybe Mick Lombardi is a guy that they promote from the bottom up, someone who worked with the wide receivers. He ended up leaving to go ahead and coach for the Raiders, so that's not an option. Troy Brown is going to be coaching the wide receivers officially, which I like, but I don't like him making the jump straight away to offensive coordinator. I think that's an absolutely terrible idea. And with that being said, there's really nobody else that the Patriots could go with. At the end of the day, offensive coordinator is such an important position because not only are you calling plays and leading this offense, but you're also helping to develop Mac Jones. And you don't want to make a guy in charge of that has only been doing this for a couple of years. So with that being said, I just think that we're in a tough position where you can't get Bill O'Brien. You don't have anybody you can promote from the bottom up. So what are they doing? They're going with experience in a guy like Matt Patricia and Joe Judge, putting those two minds together in hopes that it will be good enough to get this offense going until next year, where maybe then they can get Bill O'Brien. But let me tell you, definitely concerned for this offense, just in the sense of developing Mac Jones is going to be very crucial, especially because he's only in his second year. And he's only in his second year and is now on his second offensive coordinator. You have to think that next year the Patriots hopefully get a legit offensive coordinator, which would probably be a third different coach. You don't want that coaching staff to constantly be moving for a developing rookie quarterback, in this case, Mac Jones. And with two heads kind of batting at each other between Joe Judge and Matt Patricia, that's kind of like heads batting on defense with Steve Belichick and Gerard Mayo. I don't like it. One guy should have the voice and only one guy. So I definitely have concerns. Diehard Pats fan with a big donation of $20. Big shout out to you. Said glad the channel is back. You have said before that it is a big part of your income and something you want to do full time. This probably has monetizing messed up. Want to give more, but get paid on Monday. Do another live. Not for sure, for sure. Really appreciate the donation of $20. Nonetheless, really does help me and the channel out. Like you mentioned, obviously getting hacked for a week, wasn't able to make any content. That really screwed up a lot of stuff with obviously payment and whatnot. And obviously, this is like my full time job. This is what I'm trying to make my full time job. So making quality living off of it is a really, really, really important part of it. especially with paying bills and whatnot. Still have to be able to live an actual life. um, but yeah, since getting the channel back, monetizing has been a little messed up. It might maybe be fixed now. Maybe I don't know. We're gonna have to see how it kind of develops the next couple of days. But yes, monetizing has also unfortunately been messed up since I've gotten my account back, and is something I'm still kind of trying to talk to YouTube about. So you know your donations and all really do mean a lot. Nonetheless, whether how big or small it is, generally means a lot to me. But I do plan on going live more often. I was thinking about today, just like, wow, I haven't gone live in a while. I haven't gone live since I got my channel back. And I definitely want to go live a lot more as we're leading up to free agency, as we're leading up to the draft. There's a lot of really great stuff to talk about. And I love talking one on one with all of you guys here with live actual discussions, not just posting videos and talking to you guys through the comments. So definitely want to hop on these lives more often. But nonetheless, diehard Pats fan, really, 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 really appreciate you for that $20 donation. It means a lot. It's going to go a long way. And thanks for sticking through it through the whole hacking situation. Joey here with a $10 donation. Y'all are showing out for your boy tonight. You said the Patriots had one of the worst special team units in years in 2021. Three blocked punts, a blocked extra point, missed coverages. Nick Folk being the best player on the entire unit. I don't think anybody expected that after many people didn't have it making the final roster. Um, what do you do for 2022? Well, Joe Judge is back in the building. So you have to think that if this goes down the rails again, Joe Judge is going to have some type of say in it. Now, I know he's more of an offensive assistant, offensive coordinator ish with Matt Patricia, but you have Joe Judge back in the building. If your special teams is going to struggle like it did last year, you cannot tell me Joe Judge is not going to step in and help make some calls to get this special teams back going the way it needs to. Okay. With the amount of money, the amount of firepower Belichick puts into special teams, I guarantee you we are not going to have a special teams in 2022 like we did in 2021. It's just not going to happen. For a team on special teams, look that bad for a Patriots Bill Belichick led special teams is generational. That is not going to continue to happen. And like I said before, although Joe Judge might not be back from a pure special teams standpoint, he is still back in the building. He can still put in his 2 cents and he can still help from that side of the ball if need be. So I'm definitely confident that we will be seeing a much, much, much better version of our special teams from every single aspect of special teams, whether we're talking about the punting unit, whether we're talking about the blocking unit for extra points and field goal kicking, and maybe some personnel changes. I still think they'll bring back Nick Folk, and I think that's a smart move. But maybe in the punting unit, JC or not JC Jackson, but Jake Bailey had a pretty bad year in 2021. There's some pretty good punters in this upcoming draft. Maybe the Patriots look to save a few $1 million and pick up a new punter, move on for Jake Bailey, and try to upgrade themselves a little bit at that punter position. Which, I mean, I hate to say it because Jake Bailey's been pretty great outside of last year, but that would be the Belichick thing to do. Big shout out to you again, though, Joey. Really, really, really means a lot. Thoughts on Brady coming out of retirement to play for the Patriots? That's never gonna happen. That's never going to happen. One, doubt he wants to come back and play for the Patriots, and two, the Patriots have Mac Jones. Like it wouldn't make sense for either party at this point. Like Brady will come back when Brady signs a 1-day contract with New England, but he's not going to actually play for this team again, especially when you have an emerging young quarterback under your midst. I don't even think he's going to come back and coach for the Patriots. So the next and only time you're going to see Brady back with New England, unfortunately, is when he signs that 1-day contract. But if Brady does come out of retirement, it's going to be to play for the 49ers. Put your money on that. Anthony, man, my pleasure answering your question. So this is a good question. That I think we definitely need to touch upon. I talked about this a little bit in my video about the Patriots looking to potentially move on from Isaiah Wynn and extend Trent Brown, but it depends on the status of Isaiah Wynn. Now, are you trading Isaiah Wynn without an extension? Because Isaiah Wynn is taking up what, 13 to 15 million dollars because he's on that fifth year option. If you are looking to trade him without that extension done, I think you're getting marginally less in a trade. I definitely still think there's a market, especially for offensive linemen. Like, there is always a market for offensive linemen, and that market is going to be high. And Isaiah Wynn's a good offensive lineman. Like, is he great? Is he super consistent? No, and I think that's why we're having this discussion on the Patriots moving on from him, but he's still a well above average tackle in the NFL that would be a excellent upgrade for several teams, probably half the teams in the NFL, probably even more than half the teams in the NFL for a tackle position. But if you're looking to trade Isaiah Wynn without that extension, like I mentioned, I think you're getting marginally less just because you're getting him on a 1 year deal worth over $10 million, which I don't necessarily think he's worth. So I think you could get a fourth round pick maybe for him. I think you could probably get a fourth round pick in exchange for him. But if maybe a third, but I think third is the absolute best you're going to get. Now, if you extend Isaiah Wynn, you get an extension done with him, you have him signed for multiple years, you're bringing down that 2022 cap number to, I believe you would save about $7 million if you sign him to an extension. So he'd probably only have like a $5 or $6 million cap hit for a team if they traded under an extension. So with that being said, in that case, depending on how long the extension is, you could probably get like a second round pick, maybe a late first round pick, depending on who the team is. So it might be in the Patriots' best interest if they're looking to really, if the Patriots are looking to capitalize on the draft capital, you extend Isaiah Wynn, then trade him. If you're looking at simply shipping Isaiah Wynn off to free up the most amount of cap space, then you're just shipping him off without the extension. Looks like we got another donation here from Trey Rules. Big shout out to you for that $10 donation. You guys are popping off for your boy on the first live back since being hacked. That is what we are talking about. Let's go. Let's go here. Wait, can we get some applause? Yeah, let's go. Let's go. But you said being on a team that's lacking a speedy slot receiver, do you think we should trade for Andy Isabella? He's still under a rookie contract and won't pay a lot, and he won't cost a high draft pick either. I remember a few years ago when Andy Isabella was in the draft, and he was linked back to the Patriots heavily. Super fast, pretty decent hands, but can't get open. And I think that's the issue personally on why I would separate myself from Andy Isabella. I think that there is a lot of really good players in this year's draft at the receiver position that aren't even in the first round. I mean, I'm talking like second, third, fourth, fifth round guys that can really help fill that role. And guys in free agency that can really help fill that role better than Andy Isabella would for the Patriots. Now, look, if Andy Isabella was a free agent and he was signing for next to nothing, I wouldn't mind seeing what the guy got. Like I mentioned, heavily linked back to the Patriots before he was drafted by the Cardinals. Super, super fast, but unfortunately, inconsistent. Hasn't really put up much production over the last few years since he was drafted, and he can't get open. He doesn't have a great route tree. He doesn't have great separation. And because of that, I just don't think he's going to fit too well in this Patriots system that is just heavily based on short to area quickness and short to intermediate passing routes. That's not Andy Isabella's game. He's more of a hey, I'm going to run a go route. Hopefully, I'm going to burn these guys and get open. You just toss me the ball up. That's really more what Andy Isabella's game's about. I would say maybe if he was like an elite punt slash kick returner, but even in that sense, he hasn't really gotten much experience with the Arizona Cardinals. So it's always going to be a good discussion to talk about Andy Isabella just because he, again, was linked so heavily back to the Patriots and he is a speedster. But if you're going to go with that speedster route, get a guy that can also work as a little bit better of a technician. So personally, I would pass on Andy Isabella. Reggie P out here with another $10 donation. Reggie, go off. Or Reggie, you know what? I got you. I got you. Let's add some cheering. Yes, sir. I don't know why it sounds like kids, but yes, sir. What is a free agent addition that I think we should make? You know what? Here, let me. I have not an article, but I have some information that I have written down. Let me pop it up. So there's a lot of different positions that the Patriots really need help at. Um, with looking at the need of help at linebacker, even some help at edge. You guys might think this is crazy. You might say, "Hey, we have no money," but guys, if the Rams have taught us one thing, it's that you can always get around the cap space. You can always make money, and there are so many ways the Patriots can clear up money if they really want to. But Von Miller to the New England Patriots, I think would be an absolute excellent move. Now, it wouldn't surprise me if he went out and he re-signed with the Rams and tries to run it back with them, especially now that they won a Super Bowl. But he's had one of the best pass rush percentages this entire season since he joined the Rams. He also had one of the best pass rushing percentages in the Super Bowl era, just a little bit less of a pass rush percentage than he had in 2016 in the Super Bowl, where he just absolutely dominated, which is crazy to think that he's still performing at that high level despite being 33 years old. With that being said, though, he's obviously still one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. He's a veteran. The Patriots could use him at linebacker, but they could also use him at edge rusher. And if you could imagine Matt Judon on one side with Von Miller rushing on the other, I think that would absolutely solve any problems that the Patriots are having with pass rush issues. So Von Miller to me would be just an absolute stellar move by the Patriots. Um, Let me throw some other names out here for you. Hmm. If we had actual money, I would throw out Tyron Matthew. I feel like that would be a really good addition. And I know he's been linked back to the Patriots for, having a big compliments for Mac Jones, but I just don't think we're gonna have the money for that. If we look more so at wide receivers, some names that I do like, somebody like Christian Kirk is somebody that I would really like. We were just talking right before this comment about some explosiveness at the receiver position, more specifically in the slot, somewhere where Jacoby Myers has been performing. The thing about Jacoby Myers is while he is really good as a route runner, he's really good as a pass catcher. He does nothing for you after he catches the ball. His run after the catch is pretty much close to nothing. It's not going to get you anything. It's not like it's going to be Kendrick Bourne. With that being said, a guy like Christian Kirk is somebody who's going to be really fast out of the slot, is most productive out of the slot, but can also play on the perimeter, can play on the outside if need be too. So he brings that versatility, but he's going to bring explosiveness. He's going to bring speed to that slot position, and he's going to bring the ability to have yards after the catch while also still being a pretty sure-handed wide receiver. So that is somebody that I wouldn't mind seeing the Patriots target. From a wide receiver perspective, I know people threw out T.Y. Hilton. I'm not really big on T.Y. Hilton at this point. each year at this point, he's just kind of getting worse and worse. 2019, 28th best wide receiver in the league. 2020, 32nd best wide receiver in the league. And 2021, 52nd best wide receiver in the league. I'm kind of giving up with him at that point. Um, even a guy like Jamison Crowder is a name I wouldn't mind seeing the Patriots necessarily target as an in division rival with the Jets. I think that it could be very promising for the Patriots. Juju Smith-Schuster is another big one that I actually would not mind seeing at all. Really good technician, can play on the perimeter, mostly works out of the slot. Pretty decent size build here for the Patriots. He's not going to be like a Christian Kirk who sits at about like, and Christian Kirk's like 5'10", somewhere around there. Where Juju Smith-Schuster is going to be a little bit larger, gives a little bit of a larger target for you, but runs excellent routes, really sure hands, and is going to help out tremendously after he gets the ball in his hands. But big shout out to you there, Reggie. Yeah, Joshua gets it. Joshua understood the assignment. See, he said Christian Barmore, Matt Judon, and Von Miller. I mean, let me tell you, one of the best and absolute best ways that we can help Mac Jones succeed, not just give him a good, number one wide receiver, great offensive line, whatever, but take some of that pressure off of him by not having to put the game in his hands. You do that by having an elite defense that can give somebody like Mac Jones more opportunities. And with a pass rush like that, you're getting nothing but opportunities. Also, depending on what happens with this Patriots secondary, we're going to need this pass rush to be as elite as possible. If JC Jackson leaves, if we can't get another cornerback outside of JC Jackson, if we cannot establish this secondary, especially at the corner position, then we are going to need these pass rushers to get to the quarterback within a matter of seconds to really help hide the demolished secondary that the Patriots have in certain areas. So this is a good question. Do I think that the Patriots are going to choose the draft or free agency to help build these wide receivers more so around Mac? I say free agency. Belichick's always been a free agency type of guy when it comes to pass catchers, more specifically wide receivers. How many times, honestly, do we see Belichick going out there drafting wide receivers? And when we do, what rounds are they usually in? 6 and 7. Belichick barely drafts wide receivers. When they do, it's later in the draft. Belichick likes to go with guys who are developed, who are established, who have already been in the NFL, and you can get a genuine feel for how they're going to be at a pro level. With that being said, I don't see him all of a sudden changing. That's not to say I don't think he's not going to draft a receiver at all, but reports already coming out. They want a true number one wide receiver for Mac Jones. I don't think that Belichick is going to all of a sudden say, hey, I'm going to get that true number one wide receiver by developing a true wide receiver, number one wide receiver in the draft. Let's go get one in the first, considering he only did that once and it ended up being N'Keal Harry. No, I think he's going to do this via free agency or via trade. Light shadows, buddy. What is going on? How about signing Pierre Paul as a free agent? Is Pierre Paul a free agent? Actually, look at that right now. Let me see. Is he a free? I honestly didn't think he was a free agent. If it lets me. Oh shoot! Hold up. I did not think JPP was a. No, maybe it'll let me look it up. The scrolling on this thing is just absolutely. Edge defenders. Let's look. Uh, Emmanuel Ogbah, Melvin Ingram, Hassan Reddick, Arnold Landry, Justin Houston, Jerry Hughes, Derek Barnett. Yeah, JPP is a free agent. JPP wouldn't be terrible. He's 33 years old. I mean, maybe you sign JPP just from the perspective of, hey, you're tight up against the cap, and he's not going to be like the best free agent on the market. PFF has him as the 109th best free agent. They don't even have him in his top 100. I don't think JPP makes that big impact for this team like a Von Miller or a few other guys that we could talk about. I mean, he had a pretty bad season in 2021. I know he was dealing with some injuries. 2020 had an okay season, but he's never been like an elite pass rusher. Could he help make somewhat of a difference? Yes, but he's also 33. So there's some different routes that I would go, but I wouldn't hate to see an addition of JPP. Do I think that the new offensive coordinator will use Johnny Smith more in the system? Honestly, it won't surprise me if the same thing happens on offense that has happened with defense since Matt Patricia left, and we don't have an offensive coordinator for this upcoming season. Now, I hope I'm wrong. I hope that somehow magic happens and Bill O'Brien comes back. But from the realistic standpoint and standing from where we are currently, and from the rumors going around about Matt Patricia and Joe Judge kind of um, splitting those duties between each other as offensive coordinator, I still got to go with Johnny Smith has to be more involved in 2022 than he was in 2021 because how can you justify keeping him if he has another season like he did in 2021? Now, Josh McDaniels, obviously not here anymore, but at the time during the season, he said, look, originally, like you signed free agents, not necessarily to come in year one and make that absolute difference that you were in picturing them making when you signed them, but having that kind of be a building block year into getting to that point. It's great that it worked out for guys like Hunter Henry and Kendrick Bourne year one, but that doesn't mean it was going to work out for everybody year one. So maybe for somebody like Johnu Smith, who again isn't your real system fit, he isn't an excellent route runner who is a possessional catcher in the tight end position. He's not a real catch and traffic tight end either. He's not your Rob Gronkowski. He's a Swiss Army knife. You have to get him into space. Once you get him into space, he's going to do his thing, but he's not going to run a ton of routes. He's not going to line up as a classic tight end. That's just not the type of guy that he is. He is a tool. He's a weapon. He's a Swiss Army knife. That's how you got to utilize him. Same thing if the Patriots sign Curtis Samuel. Not your classic wide receiver. It's the things that he can do once he gets the ball in his hands, once he gets him into space, that he can do fantastic things. But I have to think that they get him more involved this upcoming season than they did the season prior. I really do believe that this past year was a building block for somebody like Johnny Smith. Now they have a lot of film to go back, look at this worked, this didn't work. How can we set up new things to get somebody like Johnny Smith more involved, especially now that the offensive playbook is going to be a little bit different now that Josh McDaniels isn't here? I do think that we will see more of Johnny Smith. Do I think he's going to go off for 1,000 yards? No, but got to believe that we see more from him in this upcoming season. I don't know if somebody's in my house or it's just really windy out. Let's see. Do we have one more good question to end out on? Hmm. All right, guys. Well, I think we're going to end it here for today. I really do appreciate everybody who joined the live stream for the last hour. We're definitely going to be going live more often. I'm also going to be dropping a video soon, potentially tonight. It's only about 8:29. Tonight or tomorrow, about a few free agent cornerbacks that the New England Patriots can target, followed up by a video at some point this week or next week about a few free agent linebackers the Patriots can also target. So make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. Like always, make sure you guys go ahead, tell all your friends, your family, Patriots lovers, Patriots haters about the channel. Let's grow the community. But like always, guys, make sure to really leave a like on this because it really helps me and the channel out tremendously. But check out the other content if you haven't already. But like always, I love you guys. I appreciate you guys, and go Patriots.